Hello, trading has closed on July 17th, 2024. We always start with our disclaimer, go over our calls, and then make some predictions. It's my trading plan for Thursday, which is July 18th, 2024. Please trade at your own risk, because my calls can be wrong. Look today for the pattern with the early low, which is certainly this, and tomorrow should be the pattern with the early high. We said that we had a number of things compatible with a drop right from the open, and then we said if it did drop, it should be a doozy. And we said if we didn't drop right from the open, that I had no call. Here's what we said. Said we didn't start down right away. I didn't have a prediction. Obviously, we started down right away, and that's a doozy of a drop. During the day, we generated lower targets. MEJT said this thing wouldn't stick. We have targets we haven't seen yet. We have a target of 5586.05. It doesn't have to print, but it'll print tomorrow 95% of the time. If it doesn't, we'll forget it. But we have a required target of 5584.80, which is under today's low, and its preferred time frame is tomorrow. So if we don't gap up smartly, we look for these targets to print tomorrow. Now, I put this in gray. There's a possible target of 5611.56. When I came up with the system 22 years ago, I would have to estimate or eyeball what would constitute an ultimate target. And I used to have a computer program, and I couldn't tell the computer program to eyeball things. So I had to give it specific criteria, which were somewhat arbitrary. Maybe I could have had the computer programmer make them less arbitrary, but I didn't. So based on the criteria on the computer program, there's no ultimate buy signal. But if I were to eyeball it, I would give us this target and a target a bit higher, which should print at some time. Now again, the figures I give for the statistics are based on the specific criteria I have with the computer program. But this didn't miss by much, satisfying the criteria, and it wouldn't surprise me if ultimately that number printed. Of course, I have higher targets for later in the year anyway, and I can't give you statistics for how likely this one is to print tomorrow, and that's why it's in gray. We'll just have to use these unless we gap up, and we'll just keep this in the back of our mind without counting it. Well, this is the break we've been calling for based on DeMark's indicators. If we're going to have a complete collapse, we should undercut this line, 54.58.43, within 3 days. As I've been saying, you could count this as the third day, but if we undercut that tomorrow, there's going to be a collapse. I think that's too far away. I don't think that's going to happen. And we have, in alignment with that, selling on the weekly, you'd have to undercut this thing back in the 5100s within 3 weeks. I don't think that's going to happen either. So a drop here, but not a collapse. But that doesn't mean there can't be a sizable drop. Now, if we look at this count, and if that's the right count, and it sure looks like the right count now, this correction should probably last months, at least weeks. But this thing is started in late October. You're talking almost 9 months. I mean, it's hard to see this over in a day or two. If that is a top, it should last a couple of months at least. And that could take it significantly lower, even if it isn't a collapse. Well, this was the ending diagonal triangle we pointed out yesterday. We said it wasn't the only count. If it weren't the only count, I didn't have a call. It sure looks like the right count now. Now the target of an ending diagonal triangle is to retrace to its origin, which is right here. We did that immediately, and we stopped right at the Fibonacci target of the triangle. So we have support here. Support doesn't have to hold, but we gapped down, hit a lower low, closed over all these intervening lows. I mean, if we don't gap down smartly, that's going to call for higher prices tomorrow. Doesn't mean you have to close higher, but at least we have a number of things making a bounce here plausible. I don't care how big this break is. If you need confirmation, the ideal confirmation is to trade under this low tomorrow, which this calls for, and ideally, the ideal confirmation would be to gap under this low and keep on dropping, or at least close under it. I think we'll do it eventually. I'm not totally convinced that'll happen tomorrow. I need to see what the open is. Well, tomorrow's pattern has a really high, which doesn't tell us where we open. There are lower MEJT targets. Unless we gap up smartly, the rules call for them to print. Gapping up smartly can't be ruled out. Today's collapse is compatible with the patterns we've been noting as this being a candidate for a top, but despite its magnitude, it, like all breaks, needs confirmation. And notwithstanding the lower targets, that confirmation is not a lock for tomorrow. We gapped down, hit a lower low, and closed over intraday lows, meaning the last few hours accomplished nothing. Hitting those targets equivalent in futures right after the close doesn't satisfy the target, which is dependent upon them printing in regular trading hours, but the support that we had there was relevant support. Just doesn't satisfy the target. The timing of the break, just after the close, shows it was not the result of big money selling. We held this level right at the target we showed for hours, and as soon as big money left the table, we broke it and then came back up again. That's not the way. That wouldn't happen if big money were selling. That's just panic selling, and it might be right. Sometimes panics work out if we get down tomorrow, but for now at least, it's a short-term positive. The low of day was a fib target of a prior consolidation. Breadth actually improved today, makes me leery we're going to gap down tomorrow, and the volatility index printed a bar well over the upper Bollinger band. Those are all things which can lead to a bounce, even if this break is the real thing, as it probably is. Doesn't mean, just because you don't get confirmation tomorrow, doesn't mean you won't get confirmation. It would make a far clearer picture for me were we to gap down tomorrow and keep dropping. However, if, underline capital, if tomorrow is an inside day, if we don't break to a new low, we should rally on Friday. And I just can't rule that out. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me at all. If we hold this, trade in the middle here, we're going to probably fill some of this gap. I think at some point, though, that's going to break. I've got lower targets. So we'll have to see how we open tomorrow. It's the pattern with the early high. If we're just going to drop from here and we just gap under this and keep on dropping, there's just no way I see us overcoming this high anytime soon. But that's not a requirement, and we have enough here to at least explain a bounce if it should come. And if tomorrow can't break this low, which we don't know yet, but if it can't break that low, I think by Friday we'll be higher. And that's today's call.